This training video is for the disassembly and reassembly of the restrictor bar into the Nordson die. The restrictor bar is also known as a choker bar or an R-bar. There are two different styles of restrictor bars that we'll be talking about today. One has a squared seal groove. The other has a rounded seal groove. The tools you will need to do this procedure are as follows: a depth mic, a soft hammer, assorted parts bins, dry graphite spray, a jar of anti-seize, brass scrapers, a brass rod or other soft material, sharp blades, threaded rods, R-bar seal, end seal gaskets, and your die came with a toolbox with an assortment of tools. And this die will be hot, so we're going to need personal protective equipment, hot gloves and sleeves, and also the manual. Before disassembly of the restrictor bar, the end seal plate system needs to be removed. The die then needs to be split apart and the surfaces need to be cleaned. You can watch our split and clean video for instructions on how to do this. Now that the die has been split and cleaned, we are going to use the assemblies to push the bar forward to aid in the removal of the restrictor bar. You can see the restrictor bar is in the die all the way in the slot. We will remove some of the assemblies equally across the die using the rest of the spools to push the bar out of the slot. We will use the restrictor bar assemblies to push the bar forward to its full stroke capability, which is around 1/4 of an inch. As you can see, the bar is starting to move out of the slot. All of the restrictor bar assemblies have now been moved to their full stroke capabilities. The restrictor bar studs have an integrated nut here and do not allow the stud to push the bar out any further, so we must use a supplied threaded rod. Now we're going to remove the rest of the restrictor bar assemblies. Now that the restrictor bar adjustment system has been removed, we are going to install the provided threaded rod. The rods need to be coated with a thin layer of anti-seize and then equally spaced across the width of the die. For For the removal of the restrictor bar, we would need to install the stud retainer plate, the spool retainer plate, and the mounting bolts. Next, we're going to turn the spools to push the bar forward, making sure you do it evenly across the bar. At this point, we can see the R-bar is now out of the die slot. We are going to completely remove all of the R-bar push assemblies from the die, making sure we leave in the two end rods. Now all of the restrictor bar push assemblies have been removed. One stud on each end of the R-bar is still left to aid in the removal of the restrictor bar. We have turned the die around to show this process a little bit better. When removing the bar, you may also need 2 or more people depending on the length of the bar. The restrictor bar and restrictor bar slot need to be cleaned and inspected, paying close attention to the seal grooves. Once this is done, you will want to apply a dry graphite lubricant to the restrictor bar slot. We will place the restrictor bar back into the die, being careful not to hit the die with the threaded rods. We have evenly spaced the threaded rods across the width of the restrictor bar. Next, we are going to install the spools onto the threaded rods. We're going to leave all the spools loose at this time. Now with the restrictor bar loose in the restrictor bar slot, we can install the seals, cut approximately 4 inches longer than the restrictor bar. The seals will be installed in the restrictor bar seal grooves. With the bar loose in the slot, you should install the first seal into the back seal groove. You want the seal to stick out from the bar at least 2 inches on each side. Now we're going to install the second seal into the seal groove. and again leaving approximately 2 inches sticking out from the end. By turning the spool, you will pull the R-bar in so the first seal groove is on the edge of the restrictor bar slot. This restrictor bar location is the correct location to install the seal. With the aid of extra people, we are going to install the next seal into the seal groove. 2 or more people will hold the seal in the seal groove, while one person uses a spool and a threaded rod to pull the restrictor bar into the slot. By turning the spool, I'm going to pull one end of the R-bar into the slot. I'm here. Yep. Good. Yep. It is important to hold the seal up into the seal groove with your fingers so it does not get ruptured or pinched during this installation. You will keep rotating the spool slowly and pulling the bar into the slot, going from one spool to the next. Am I good here? Now that the seal has been installed, we are going to repeat the same process and install the last seal. Ready?
Yep, ready.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, I'm right here.
Yep.
Again, it's very important to hold the seal in the seal groove while pulling the restrictor bar in the die. You do not want the seal to get ruptured or cut during this assembly. Also, while pulling our restrictor bar in the slot, it is common to shave a little bit of the seal off. I'm here. Now that the seals have been installed, we are going to pull the restrictor bar all the way into the slot by turning the spools. We will be turning each spool a little at a time until it is all the way seated into the slot. The rounded seal groove restrictor bar is pushed out the same way as a square sealed grooved restrictor bar, but there is a difference installing the rounded seal groove restrictor bar. The main difference with this type of restrictor bar is that the seals are installed into the bar before it is put into the die. You will start with seals cut 4 inches longer than the R-bar itself. Using a soft face hammer, we will tap the seals into the seal groove. You can use a roller or a soft face hammer to move along the seal to make sure there are no bumps in the seal. To double check for any bumps that are in the seal, run your fingers along the length of the seal. Next, you will need to cut the seal flush with the sides of the bar. Then we will turn the bar over and do the same on the other side. Now we will place our threaded rods evenly spaced across the bar. Once the threaded rods are evenly spaced across the bar, spray the slot with dry graphite lubricant. Now we will place the bar into the die, being careful not to hit the die with the threaded rods. Next, we're going to install the stud locking plates and the spools onto the threaded rods. Now we will slowly tighten the spools until the R-bar is fully seated into the slot. We will do this by turning each spool a little at a time, moving from one end to the other. Regardless of the type of restrictor bar that you have, the assembly instructions are the same from this point forward. Now that we have the R-bar and it has been pulled into the slot, it is very important that the R-bar be centered in the die body. First, we will remove all of the assemblies from the restrictor bar except the two end assemblies. Use a depth mic to check to see that the restrictor bar is centered within the die. If it is not centered, you need to loosen the end spools that you pulled the die bar in with. And with the aid of a soft metal, a brass, or an aluminum, you can tap the restrictor bar to center it. It is important to note that some restrictor bars are manufactured longer than the overall length of the die body because of thermal expansion properties. With the R-bar centered in the die body, we are going to tighten the spools on each end to hold the restrictor bar in that location. Now we're going to start the assembly of the restrictor bar adjustment system. We have already applied a thin layer of anti-seize on the stud threads. When installing the R-bar stud, it is very important that the nut on the stud be slightly under the retainer plate. As you can see, the nut is slightly under the retainer plate. This procedure is the same for both types of R-bar systems. At this time, the R-bar spool can be installed. You need to apply a thin coat of anti-seize to the bottom of the spool, the sides of the spool, and around the crown of the spool. Also, apply anti-seize to the stud threads. Thread the spool on until it seats against the retainer plate here. Now the spool retainer plate can be installed. Again, we have applied a thin layer of anti-seize on the cleaned mounting plate bolts. That completes one R-bar adjustment assembly. When one assembly is done on each end of the die, you can remove the threaded rod and spools on the ends of the die. You will want to repeat this procedure until all R-bar adjustment assemblies are installed. With the R-bar fully installed, it is important that the excess graphite lubricant spray be cleaned off the flow surfaces before the die gets put together. Now the die has been fully put together and we are going to trim the seals. You trim the seals approximately 1/8 inch longer than the length of the restrictor bar. The next procedure, we're going to install the push plate and end seal plate into the die. And we are going to crush the R-bar seals into the end of the die. Please note that the end seal gasket is not installed at this time. Now that the R-bar seals have been crushed on both ends, we are going to remove the end seal plates. Next, we are going to trim off the excess seal. Now the end seal plate assembly can be installed with the gaskets. It needs to be flush with the die lip. The bolts need to be snugged up, pushing the seal plate system tight to the die bodies to retain the seals during the heat up procedure of the die. After the main body bolts have been torqued, the die can be brought up to its operating temperature. Once the die lip gap is established, the end seal system can be torqued to the correct specifications. Additional Nordson training videos are available for these procedures. Now that your Nordson restrictor bar die has been properly cleaned and set, it is ready for production once again. We would like to thank you for taking the time to view our instructional video. If you have any questions regarding the content of this video or would like to order any of the supplies or spare parts featured in today's video, please contact your Nordson sales representative.